Hi, welcome to Mr. Otter Studio. Today I'm answering a question that has been asked over 6 years now. What kind of paper am I using? And can you use watercolor on printer paper? Some of you are stuck at home and that's all you have to use right now. And so doing this tutorial, I learned something very surprising, that you can actually use it. You just have to be careful, and you have to just use, I'll give you 2 tips. Basically for using printer paper. The keys are using less water on your brush, less paint on your brush when you're putting it on the paper. You can use as much water as you want when you're mixing up the washes over here, but when you put it on your paper, make sure that your brush isn't too loaded up with paint and water. All right, so I have my color. Before I paint, and you can do this on a rag, you can do this on paper towel if you have it, you just need to get some of that water off. You don't want to have your brush full of paint, so just dry it off a little bit. And then come over to your paper and paint. And then the second thing is just be gentle with your paper, be patient, let it dry, and just know that it's probably gonna warp a little bit, and that's totally fine. But the less water you use, the less likely that's going to happen. And if it does happen and you don't like it, sometimes I just iron my paper. That's a little tip. Sometimes I do that, and it's okay. One thing though that I would be careful, and what I wouldn't do on it, is lifting off. So that's where, like, if this was a sky, lifting off would be where you dry your brush and then you come back in and you pick up paint. You can also, maybe it would work, but you could do it with paper towel. Let's see. Yeah, you can't. There is no lifting off with printer paper. You just don't have time to do it. And if you tried, this is what would happen. Like if I wanted to remove that blue and like paint some skies in here. Do you see these little pieces? Zoom in, camera. What is happening now is that it's just starting to rub through my paper. And I'm not being gentle, and I did use a lot of water. But it doesn't really take much to tear this kind of paper. Even on watercolor paper though, I'm careful not to scrub it like this. But printer paper, it's so much thinner that it's just so much easier to do. And then it becomes really fragile. And if you turn this paper around, you can see that it's actually gone through the back, and this potentially will tear. So, I mean, look at that. That's just weak. It weakens the paper, so you have to be so careful with it. You can soften edges though, if you're really quick and not using too much water. And yeah, you just need to be a little bit more patient, work with thinner layers, and be okay with your paper starting to warp a little bit. I mean, you can see, I think it's easiest to see on the back. This is what I mean by warping. This is what happens to your paper, but hey, it's okay. I mean, you can still use it, just be gentle. And I use watercolors all the time on printer paper. I just use them in a different way. Thank you so much for drawing with me today. I learned a lot doing this with you. So remember the 2 tips that I gave you. Don't use too much water or paint on your brush, or else your paper can tear. It just kind of weakens it a little bit. I don't know what parts of me you can see right now. And then the second thing is just be very gentle. So let your layers completely dry before you add another color over the top, and do not scrub it. So don't go over and over and over. And also, you can't really lift the color off of printer paper like you can with watercolor paper, but that's it. So you can totally use it, and I hope that you are using it if that's what you have. But remember, when you can, I would recommend watercolor paper, because it's so much easier to work with, and the colors have time to blend, and the paper can withstand a lot more abuse, I guess. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next week on Mr. Otter Studio.